What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mick Thinks Tiny. My name is Mick. So, one state that's seen a huge surge in the tiny house industry is the state of Texas. Multiple tiny house communities were developed last year, became open, 55 plus communities and just communities without age restrictions. There's even new communities right now in early 2025 that are popping up. So, it's worth talking about whether or not Texas is a good option for those of you who want to go tiny and what that would look like. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and let's jump into it. Let's talk about Texas and tiny homes. All right, welcome back. So today we're talking about going tiny in Texas. So even though everything is bigger in Texas, we've got some tiny homes to talk about, which are pretty small for the most part. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about Texas because it's seen a lot of growth in this industry, which says to me, with all the research that I've been doing, that this is an attractive place for people to move to downsize, to retire, and just change their lifestyle, and they want to do it by going tiny. So we're going to talk about what different options are for tiny houses when we're talking about Texas. So if you were to put Texas into tiny house listings right now, you would get something that looks a little bit like this. So you would get a pretty good range in terms of the size, the price, but also the type of tiny homes. Like you see the tiny home like ADU setup for the one in the middle at the top over there in Austin, Texas. So there's a lot of options for you if you're looking to go tiny. There's no shortage of builders or tiny homes that you could buy that have been pre-owned. When we're talking about tiny house builders, I'm only going to talk about a few. The most well-known one, in my opinion, would be Indigo River. So they make tiny homes. They've got some really awesome designs. You can check out their website. This is what it looks like. You can check out those models. And then you also have a tiny house builder called LifeSpark. So looking more at park models. I want to take a minute and talk about park models because park models are a huge part of the market that is growing for tiny homes in general across the United States, but specifically in Texas. So most of the tiny house communities that you're going to see, the ones that I'm going to briefly talk about today and the ones I'll talk about more extensively in a future video about tiny house communities in Texas, are going to feature those park models either from the builders that they have partners with or they're building them themselves. So park models are really important for you to think about if you're looking at going tiny in Texas, which in my opinion makes sense because, like I said before, everything is bigger in Texas and park models tend to be bigger. Also, the people that are potentially looking to go tiny in Texas aren't really concerned with moving their tiny home. If it's a 55 plus community, a park model makes more sense because it's going to be wider, it's going to be longer, it's going to have more of those features that make it feel like a standard home, just in a smaller square footage. So park models are an attractive option for people, and it's easier to get financed as well too because they're sort of set up more, they're registered as RVs. Okay, that's my 2 cents about park models. Okay, so when we're looking at tiny homes in Texas, we're looking at the laws. I decided to look at Austin because it's a pretty big hub. One of the things that makes Texas an attractive area is that you have quite a few major cities because the state's so big. You've got Houston, you've got Dallas, you've got Austin. Each one of those little areas offers, each one of those cities offers their own amenities, their own pluses, if you will, their own attractions. So and their own cultures as well too. So it's important to check out where you want to live, I would say first, and then see if there's tiny house communities or builders in that area. So we're looking at Austin, pretty standard. They're using the standard definition. It's got to be less than 400 square feet. Does not include the lofts, so that's a positive. If you've got a builder that's going to build you a loft, you don't have to worry about that in the square footage. There are quite a few forms that you have to fill out in Austin, so I would check those out and make sure that you get things permitted as well too. So that's all really important. But if you choose a community that has builder partnerships, they might take care of some of that for you so you don't have to deal with as much of the red tape. So just make sure you ask questions and see what your builder or your tiny house community developer is willing to help figure out for you. So when we're talking about tiny house communities, we're sort of asking the question of whether or not there are tiny house communities in Texas. We already know that there are. I've had quite a few on the channel, but there's more popping up, so it's worth talking about them. And then there's some I haven't mentioned before, so I'm just going to briefly talk about them. So one is Liberty Tiny Village. So this is one that I've had on the channel back a year ago. This is a great community. It's got a lot of amenities and things like that. This is what their website looks like. Liberty Tiny Village is located about an hour north of Dallas in a city called Aubrey, Texas. It's a 55 plus community, so it's a restriction, but it's great for those of you who do want to live in an age restricted area. It's gated, you're looking at park models. It's a little bit on the higher side, which I know some of you have mentioned. It's $950 a month, but it is covering a lot of things, and it's a builder and community. So The community is run by obviously Liberty Tiny Homes, so they're a builder. They've got a quick build time, 60 to 90 days, and it's a resort-style community with tons of, like I said, amenities. But you can check out their website and reach out to them and ask questions. Next up is Village Farm. I've never mentioned them before. Village Farm is pretty well known at this point in Austin, Texas, but this is what their website looks like. It's a little bit different. So it's 20 minutes from downtown Austin, Texas, but it is in city limits. It's an agri-hood community, so they focus on community farming, so they're looking more at sustainability and that sort of thing. You do have to buy the home from them, but they do have homes for sale. It's resort style, and it's gonna come down a little bit from Liberty Tiny Village's price to $750 a month. So it's worth checking out, especially if you want to be in the heart of the city and you want to have more of a community farming and sustainability sort of feel or vibe, if you will. So when we're talking about if tiny living is worth it in Texas, we have to talk about some of the factors I've mentioned in the videos I've done on other states. So we have to think about what your options are. So you can get a tiny house on wheels, a single family dwelling. You just have to figure out where you can put it. So you have to make sure you check out the laws in the area that you want to be in, because they do vary so greatly from county to county. You do have several tiny house communities, so you could do a tiny house community. You just have to keep in mind what type you want to be in, because some are going to restrict the type of tiny home. So you have to make sure that if you don't want a park model home and you don't have a park model home, don't choose a community where that's restricted by the builder and its park model. You can also buy land as well too, which I will talk about now. So land options in Texas, it varies, right? I'm not familiar with Texas as a state, so I've just pulled some stuff off of Land Search to give you an idea of what the range of possibilities are for buying land and then putting a tiny house there or building out what already exists. So like for this first piece of land here, this has a property on it. It's got a structure. It's for sale in Stockdale, Texas for $255,000, but you're getting 12 acres. You could do a lot with 12 acres in terms of tiny house community or just having a tiny house and then just sort of like living out your land ownership dreams. Maybe you want to do some things with farming, animals, that sort of thing. Your other option, if you want to spend a little bit less, there's 5 acres for sale in Mountain Home, Texas at $175,000. Looks like it has a home that kind of looks like a tiny house already. So that's a good opportunity for you. Everything's already connected to the city and, services and water and things like that. So that could be an option, but it's going to run you almost $200K. And then there's an opportunity for buying land in Troop, Texas. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. It's at $295. It's 5 acres. What I like about this is not only is there a structure there, it's fenced, it already kind of looks like a tiny house community. So for $300,000, which I know is not like nothing, but if you have an idea of your financial sort of like abilities or readiness, maybe this is something that's attractive to you. You could put $300,000 into buying this land with this property on it, put a couple, develop a few parcels, develop a few lots, figure it out, and decide whether or not you want to have like a small tiny house community. It doesn't have to be huge. So this is a really cool option. I was excited to find this one. So when we're thinking about if Texas is a good option for going tiny, we got to look at the pros, we got to look at the cons. I feel like it's worth talking about each one. So you can have a tiny house on wheels. You just have to figure out where you can put it. From what I've seen, mostly it's tiny house communities and park models, but it just depends. So there are land options, there are community options, there's 55 plus communities. I'm putting that on the pro side because I know that there are a lot of you in the 55 plus age range and you want to feel safe. You want to feel like it's secure, you want to feel connected to people, and you don't want younger people in the area. So 55 plus communities are great. The downside is price of land. It's going to be a downside everywhere. For most of the videos I'm going to do, hopefully I can find cheaper land. The price of communities, which I know some of you already mentioned. I know $950 is a lot for a lot of you to pay. Location, if you're too far out from like Walmart's, Costco's, things like that. And then the community restrictions between the age restrictions and the house restrictions, that might be just a deal breaker for some of you. But ultimately, I want to know what you think. So again, as I'm doing these different videos, just kind of trying to do a little bit more of a deep dive on some of these states so that you have a better idea of what it would actually look like to go tiny and what the full range of your options are. Because it's so important that you choose a builder that's not too far away from you. Unless you have the ability to spend upwards of $10,000 on delivery, you want to make sure that the builder is as close as possible. So there's just so many things you have to do, research-wise. I'm trying to sort of take a little bit of that off of your shoulders, but ultimately it's up to you. So you've got to do your research. So let me know what you think. Drop comments. If you have questions, I'm here. I can help out, being on this journey with you, help you figure out builders or communities. So make sure you send me an email if you have any questions at makethingstiny@gmail.com, which is here below in the video. And yeah, I appreciate you guys so much. I'll keep looking up places and states and laws. I want to just make sure that you guys have the most up-to-date information as possible. But I appreciate you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to think tiny. I'll see you guys in the next one.